Today's lecture is the 10 commandments of post-rounding. So what are we talking about when we talk about post-rounding? So in my mind, the post-round refers to everything that happens after the debate is over. So the process of the judge deciding the debate is an aspect of the post-round. The judge's delivery of the RFD is the aspect of the post-round. And then we're going to focus in on the process of asking questions of the judge after their decision is over. That is the post-round. Oftentimes, I hear people only refer to post-rounding as the process of arguing with the judge about their decision, having aggressive conversations with the judge about decisions that the debaters think are unjust. And while that is post-rounding and is an aspect of the post-round, in my mind, the post-round and post-rounding is the process of asking questions, sort of regardless of tone or tenor of those conversations, any sort of question and answer period after the debate. That's the post-round, that's post-rounding. That's what we're talking about today. The first commandment of post-rounding is always post-round. Never, ever, ever, ever leave a room without asking the judge some questions about their decision or some questions about the debate. The most frustrating experiences that I have as a coach are listening to my debaters say, we lost this debate and we lost it because the judge is a moron who doesn't know what he's talking about. And I go, well, did you ask them some questions? Can we clarify the decision? Do we know why we lost? Go, oh, no, I didn't ask them questions. They're a moron. I don't want to hear what they have to say. This is a bad practice. So always, even if you're really frustrated, ask some questions of the judge to try to figure out, one, what happened during the debate, right? Are you confused about why the team that won? Are you confused about why the team that lost? Ask some questions about that, clarify that decision. If you don't understand that, it's going to be really hard to go about the process of improvement. So ask questions about that. Ask questions about things that happened in the middle of the debate, speeches you gave, strategic decisions you made. We'll talk a little bit more in some of the further commandments about what the best kinds of questions are to ask and sort of where those questions should be targeted, but always ask questions. No one learns anything if you hear a decision, get angry at the decision, and then walk out of the room without talking about it. You are doing yourself a disservice, you're doing your coaches a disservice because you're not adding to your understanding. The post-round is a unique process that we have in debate where you can talk to the judge about your decision and you should use it. And look, there are going to be times where you're frustrated. This is going to happen inevitably in debate. You are going to be frustrated at decisions. You're going to be frustrated at the judge. It's happened to me countless times in my debate career. This lecture is about how to channel those situations productively to create learning experiences. And the first step is to ask questions. Particularly when you're here at the camp tournament, you are going to debate in front of people who will judge no high school debates during the year. They solely coach at the college level, and they're really, really smart people, right? So you have unique opportunities to have really, really valuable post-round time with some really high-level college coaches here, and you should use that time. You shouldn't let that time go to waste. You should talk to those coaches about their decisions and have those conversations because it's an opportunity. It's a learning opportunity. Don't let that opportunity go to waste. Do not leave the post round without asking questions because you're not going to do yourself any good if you walk out angry. You are going to do yourself some good if you ask questions about some things that maybe you didn't understand during the debate, aspects of the decision that you didn't understand, some things that you want to learn about. 2, ask, don't argue. So common advice for cross-examination, right, is don't ask, argue. Here, it's the inverse. Ask, do not argue. You will never get the judge to change their mind about who won the debate, okay? So if you're like, you're going to the post round, you're like, this judge made the wrong decision, I would like to convince them that they made the wrong decision. That is not a valuable use of your post round time, because the judge is not going to change their minds, right? The ballot is in. They have decided who they believed won the debate. They have told the tab room and the tournament directors who they believe won the debate. That's their decision, right? And so we want to respect that they've made their decision, and we're not going to change their mind about the decision and try to, use the persuasive power of our logic to, show them the ills of their ways and the injustice that just occurred. That's probably not going to happen. But we can use the post round as a learning experience, right? We can ask the judge about what happened, try to get a little bit in their mind, and try to figure out what's going on so we can learn. Even if you have a judge that, you don't think particularly highly of, you don't think particularly highly of their qualifications or their decision. Look, debate is a communication activity. And our job, concretely, in any individual round that we have, is to persuade the person in the back of the room to vote for us, okay? So even if you don't think particularly highly of your judge, the post round is a learning experience to figure out the gaps in your communication. What were things that you thought you explained well that maybe the judge did not understand? And why, right? Is it because you didn't make enough emphasis about it? Is it because that you didn't utilize repetition, right? Sometimes debaters, and I think particularly in the era where it is much more common for debaters to have material that is pre-written in the 2NR or the 2AR, you will frequently hear post-round conversations where, the debater says, well, look, you said, that you wanted us to make this argument, or, you thought it would have been good if we said X, and we said it. It's in my 2NR block. It's in my 2AR block, and they'll show the block to the judge or whatever. The reason why I think that this is a little bit wrong-headed is because, one, you are communicating to judges far less than you think you are. That is a general principle of judging that I've learned from judging a lot of debates, is that the judge is writing down far fewer words than you're saying. And this is intuitive, right? Because, in debate that we're talking fast, and the judge isn't going to transcribe every word you say. But they're catching the most important things and the most important words. They're trying to synthesize the arguments. They're trying to resolve the arguments that are happening. And so sometimes these little nuances that are articulated really quickly in these late rebuttal blocks, they don't come up in the decision because they're not clearly communicated to the judge, right? And so you want to make sure that you're, if there's a communication gap, right? The judge didn't get this argument, they didn't get this nuance. How do you resolve that communication gap? Well, you need to make that argument a larger priority in your future final rebuttals, right? You need to talk about that argument more. You need to use, you need to use changes in volume, and you need to use vocal inflection in final rebuttals to make those arguments stand out, right? There's a whole host of these communication things that often are missed and often go by judges, and you can use the post round to figure out, okay, I thought this argument was really important. You didn't think it was really important. What gives, right? Like, what's the gap there? How do I communicate better? Is this a flaw in the argument? Is it a flaw in my evidence? That's what you're trying to figure out. So ask questions of the judge. Don't argue with the judge. They've made their decision. They think about debate the way they think about debate. Your job is to use it as a learning experience to figure out what can you do better next time, right? What mistakes were made, and how can you change things? That's what's most important. Third commandment of post-rounding: be respectful. Recognize that your judge is a human being. I will tell you a dirty little secret of judging, which is that judges are flawed. They sometimes make mistakes. Oftentimes, they were up late the night before doing research for their team. They might be judging the debate on little sleep. They might not have eaten a lot of food during the duration of the weekend. They might be highly stressed because they are in the period of time which is like the most high stress time of their job. They are balancing logistics, they are balancing coaching their teams, they are doing their best to judge your debate and to judge it well, but they're not going to be perfect doing so because they are not perfect people and they are not operating under the perfect circumstances. And so we want to engage with our judges with some grace, even in situations where we're frustrated, right? Because we know we're going to be frustrated sometimes. We're granting that premise. That's going to happen. That's okay. But we still want to approach the judge with some grace, some understanding that there's a human being at the other end of the table, and we want to be able to talk to them as a human being. So a few hard rules about this. Don't swear at your judge. Don't levy personal attacks or insults at your judge. Do not raise your voice to the level of yelling or screaming at your judge. There are a lot of reasons for this. Primarily, this does you no good. It is not that cathartic, and it hurts your relationship with the judge long term. And there are some nuances of this that we'll talk about, but this does you no good. It doesn't help you learn or use the post round as a learning experience. It just damages your relationship with the judge, okay? So don't swear at the judge, don't levy personal attacks or insults, don't raise your voice to the level of yelling or screaming. The result of that will be either the judge will meet your energy, right? And they'll start insulting you and yelling and screaming at you. You don't want that. That's good for no one. Or the judge will shut down and they'll not want to engage in this post round anymore because they feel it is a bad experience for them and they're not going to want to help you learn, okay? So try to keep it at the level of questions, at the level of we are understanding this person as a human being. We're not going to insult them. There is a bigger picture involved in your individual relationship with any individual judge, okay? So I see these situations prop up where you go, well, we've heard the worst decision in the history of decisions. We know we are going to strike this judge forever until eternity. So like, why not let it out now? Because this person is never going to judge us again. And if we pass them by in the hallways, we're not going to make eye contact because this decision was so horrible. Well, there's a bigger picture involved. One, typically when you are part of a debate team, right? When you are with your school in a team where there are multiple teams, one of the most beautiful aspects of debate is you are part of something bigger than yourself, right? So you are not just an individual debater, you are part of a debate team. You represent something. You represent a school, right? When I'm at a debate tournament, everything I do or say is representative of the University of Georgia, both because that is my employer, but also because that is my debate team. Even when I was an employee of other universities, when I was at a debate tournament, because I was a University of Georgia debater, the things that I said were representative of the University of Georgia because that's what I am the product of, that's what I represent in debate, right? That is bigger than me, and it's bigger than any individual debater, and it's something that I care quite a bit about, right? So the way that you interact with judges and the way that you form relationships with other people in the debate community, be they judges or opponents, has impacts not just on you, but on your team. I'll give you a kind of concrete example of where this came up. So a couple of years ago, I was at a college debate tournament and we had a debater get very, very frustrated at a judge and they broke this rule. They swore at the judge, they raised their voice at the judge, they argued with the judge, and they levied some personal attacks and insults, right? So, burned a bridge with the judge. And from a coaching perspective, when I saw this, I thought about, okay, well, there's a coaching moment here about, what to do and what not to do in the post round, but I was really concerned for well, what happens when one of our other teams debates in front of that judge the next debate? because that could happen. That could, that is a very distinct possibility. And so you never want to put your teammates in a bad position as a result of the way that you've conducted yourself in the post round. So always conduct yourself in the post round, understanding that there's a bigger picture, that you represent a team and a school, and there are other debaters that debate for that school right now, debate for that school next year, debate for that school in 3 years, and the judge's perception of them could be affected by the way that you've conducted yourself in the post round, right? So you always want to be aware of that. The other factor of this is that people in debate know other people in debate, and they like to talk. So if you in a post, if you're having a debate in front of a judge, who I'm friends with, and like basically all the teaching staff here, we're close to each other, we're friends with each other. If you levied some personal attacks and insults and swore at them in the post round, I'd probably hear about it. Like almost certainly I would hear about it. Whether, I would think any differently of you, I don't know, probably not. I'm a little bit ambivalent about these things sometimes, but someone might, right? So word spreads. The reputational effects of your post round are not just isolated to that judge, because that judge has friends, that judge has people that you talk to. Those people probably also judge you and also judge your teammates, right? So you want to be aware of all of those things when you're thinking about the post round. Commandment number 4. The team that lost is the first team that gets to ask questions. This is an etiquette thing. I see it broken so often, and it frustrates me to no end. Okay? This is self-explanatory, but the post round is a process primarily for the team that lost to understand why they lost and understand what they need to do to get better. So that team should get to be the first team to ask questions. The most common place where this is broken, it's an elimination round where there's a panel, the decision is a 2-1, and then the person who sits gives the first decision, which is the norm for how these panel decisions go, and the team that was on top, that won the debate, immediately starts post-rounding the person who sat. No, this is bad form. That is horrible. Stop doing that if anyone is doing that. It frustrates me to no end. The team that lost the debate is the first team that gets to ask questions. Once the team that lost the debate has asked all of the questions that they would like to ask, and they have exhausted the post round, then the team that won can start to ask some questions. Okay, so the team that lost goes first, and they get to finish their post round before the team that won gets to begin their post round. It's an etiquette thing, critically important. The 5th commandment of post rounding: learn why you lost. Learn why you lost. If you listen to a decision and you, at the end of that decision, cannot clearly articulate back to yourself, and again, more importantly, back to your coach or your teammates, why it is that you lost, if you're confused, ask. Ask for clarification. If you don't know how the judge assessed the risk of your disadvantage, ask them. If you don't know how they evaluated one of your link arguments on a critique that you made a big deal about in the 2&R, ask them. Don't leave confused about what the decision said and what the decision was about, okay? If you're like, well, this decision was roundabout and it wasn't particularly clear and concise, again, that happens. I've seen decisions like that. Judges are imperfect. Some judges, are stream of consciousness. They might be clear and concise about who won and why. Ask for clarification, okay? Don't leave the room without learning why you lost. The most valuable thing that policy debate does as an activity is it forces young students to encounter loss. Someone is going to tell you that you lost at a competition, and they're going to tell you why you lost at that competition. This is different from basically anything else, right? You might lose a sport, and why you lost at that sporting event is a little bit complicated, okay? It's because it's not always one thing. You might lose a game of chess, and to figure out why you lost that game of chess, you're going to have to analyze it and like use an AI engine to figure out what the best moves were in the position, right? It's a complicated process. But in debate, someone tells you, they inform you in no uncertain terms, one, that you lost, two, why. This is very, very valuable because it helps us improve. Once we understand why we lost, we can take intervening steps to prevent losing in the future. We can give rebuttal redos that incorporate feedback from the decision. We can cut cards that improve evidence quality issues that the decision told us about. We can use judge feedback to get better because they have told us why we lost, and we can prevent why we lost from happening again. So if you are ever confused about why you lost, ask. Ask about the decision. We've got to figure out what happened here, why the team that won, why the team that lost. The sixth commandment of post-rounding. Ask about strategy before you ask about speeches. Oftentimes in post rounds that occur in debates that I judge, I hear a lot of what I call the rebuttal fodder question, rebuttal redo fodder question. So they'll say, hi, do you have any comments about my 1NR? How could I have improved my 1AR? How could I have improved my 2AR, my 2NR? These questions have some utility, but in a typical competitive debate environment, right? At a tournament, typically your judge during the debate is not thinking about how to prepare your speeches for redos. Now, this is different in some camp debates that you'll have because we will literally prepare, your speeches for redos, and because we're in a more sort of educational environment where we're going to talk about some things speech by speech. But in a tournament environment, the judge is thinking about how to resolve the major issues of the debate. They are thinking about how the strategies connect, whether the dissad outweighs the advantage, does the counter plan solve the case, is this T violation something that's a big deal, right? Those are the questions that the judge is thinking about while the debate's happening. They're not always thinking about what is the minutia for how I would advise this debater to improve their 1AR. So the first questions you should be asking about are about strategic decisions. We kicked advantage 2 in the 1AR. Do you think that was the right choice, given the debate? Was it the wrong choice, given the debate? Did we go for the right 2NR option? You should basically always ask that question, I think, just like as a rule. Should you have gone for this 2NR versus the other option in the block? Always ask that. We doubled down on no link instead of the uniqueness push in the 1AR. Should we have gone for uniqueness? Should we have gone for thumpers, right? Ask about the strategic decisions that you've made and ask whether those were the right strategic decisions. Because there you're going to get some information both about strategy for future debates. So maybe the best way to answer court clog is by making a lot of uniqueness arguments rather than making a lot of link arguments. That's useful information to have because you're probably going to debate the court clog DA again. But you're also going to learn sort of as you do this iteratively, you're going to learn how to make good strategic decisions. So you're going to get the thought process of the people that judge you, and you're going to kind of be able to sponge that up and internalize it. And in the future, when you're making strategic decisions about, well, how do I split the block? How do I decide what to go for in the 2NR? How do I decide, how to make sort of 1AR strategic decisions? All of those things, that process is going to be helpful. So ask about strategy before you ask about speeches. 7. The 7th commandment of post-rounding is to take copious notes of what is happening in the post-round. You should have a written record of what's happening in the post-round. There are 2 ways that I see this done. My recommendation is that you should have a document, a Word document on your computer with all the post-round comments for every debate that you have this year and going on forever. You should have a running document of post-round comments where you write down the decision, you write down notes of the judge's answers to your post-round questions, you write down whatever notes are necessary for what's happening after the debate. You should have a written record of these things. Why is this important? Well, when we're in the post-round process, again, you can, being part of a team, you can sort of effectuate some economies of scale about how judges think about debates, right? So maybe we've decided, you're debating in front of a judge that you're not going to strike always and forever. You're going to take that judge again at another tournament, or your teammates are going to take that judge again in another tournament. Well, it's good to learn about how that judge thinks about debate. When you go for framework, does this judge think that you should go for procedural fairness impacts? Or does this judge think that you should primarily be going for clash impacts? That's a really important question to know, and there's a lot of subjectivity about judges on this, and sometimes judges are not particularly clear in their judge philosophies about which way they kind of lie on these questions. So you ask questions in the post round, take notes, and then your team should have access to those notes. So they should be open sourced, shared within the team, share them with your coaches. So you should have a lot of information about particular judges because it's an information sharing question. So the next time you debate in front of that judge, you can access your notes or you can access your teammates' notes and you can see, okay, the last time we debated in front of this judge, he thought that the politics disad was horrible. It was, it was not intrinsic. He really likes intrinsicness arguments, so we should go for intrinsicness this time. Or this other judge thought the politics DA was awesome and politics theory is a non-starter. These are useful things to know about your judge. You can make minute and nuanced judge adaptation decisions based on a collection of written notes and written material about how your judge thinks about debate. The 8th commandment of post-rounding, follow up. The post-round doesn't have to end when you walk out of the room. You can email the judge later and ask them questions. Now, important addendum to this. Do not use "I will email you questions later" as a way of getting out of commandment number 1 to always post-round. I have encountered, of the hundreds of debates that I've judged, I've seen so many debaters who go, hey, I'm not going to ask you questions right now. I'm going to process the debate. I'm going to email you questions later. I say, great. I can count on one hand the amount of debaters who have actually emailed me questions later. I think that people sometimes use that as a way of going, I fulfilled my post-rounding requirement. I have verbally expressed the intention to send an email, and then they never send that email. Stop doing that. Please stop doing that. If you would like to follow up, do follow up, right? Send an email, ask that judge a question later. Again, especially when we're here at camp, if you stop me in the lunchroom and you're like, hey, during your decision, you said this or that, and you said we should have split the block this way and not that way. What do you mean by that? We can talk about that, right? So use your judges as a resource, long-term, follow up on these questions. And again, maybe you're having difficulty understanding why you lost even after asking questions, right? So you've asked questions and, you walk out of the room and you go, I still don't understand this decision. I still don't get it. Ask more questions. Follow up with the judge. Try to figure this out because, again, we're trying to use this as a learning experience, so ask some questions. Commandment number 9, adapt the post-round to your judge. Not every judge is the same. So, you're going to debate in front of different judges, and you're probably going to want to ask those different judges different sets of questions. Now, we know that in the context of competition, all judges are essentially created equal in the sense that they all have equal access to the ballot right? And they are all sort of equally deciding who wins and loses in an individual round. But the questions that you might ask, for example, a parent judge about how you were able to communicate some of the finer points, whether you were clear in your speaking style, are not the same questions that you might ask, Turner in the post round about the sort of nuances of the link to the CAPK, right? So think about your judge, the judge's academic specialties, the judge's debate specialties, and ask them questions that you think that they would be available to answer. Now, again, it's like sometimes judges, you might ask them questions about, strategy. That's like, okay, like what's the optimal 2-and-R against this AF? And some judges are going to say, well, I'm a coach and like that's proprietary information or something like that. But some judges are going to be open, right, about that stuff, and they're going to be helpful about these things. And so, the worst thing that can happen if you ask a question about strategy or ask a question about debating an argument is that the judge sort of cuts you off in that regard and says this is like proprietary coaching information. But, by and large, you can, especially if you can relate it back to the debate, ask questions about the content of the arguments that are available and sort of use your judges kind of as mini coaches, right? Ask them for help, ask them for understanding about arguments because they're there to help you and they're there to help you learn. Commandment number 10 is to be aware of power dynamics. So you want to understand who it is, and this is related to the 9th commandment, but it's a little bit different in terms of application. So, who is in the back of the room? Is this person someone who judges, hundreds of debates a year? Is this a parent judge who only judges on the weekend? Is this someone from a racial or gender minority, right? Understand what the power dynamics are involved. Because there are some judges who get very, very uncomfortable in situations where they feel like power dynamics are being exploited and you're kind of being mean, asking them questions that are aggressive, right? So, related to some of the comments about making sure we understand the judge as a person, but also understand whatever power dynamic is involved in the room and understand that, you don't want to be exploitative of that power dynamic or conducting yourself in any way where it looks like you're not understanding the judge as a sort of specific person who comes from a specific subject position that they enter the debate round into, and you want to make sure that you're again, in recognition of ideas that sometimes female judges or black judges are subject to aggressive post rounds in ways that white judges or male judges are not always. And so that, I think, aspect is important to think about when you're entering into a post round. Be aware of the power dynamics involved and make sure that you're keeping sort of respect and an understanding that the judge is a human in the way that you're interacting with the judge. So those are the 10 commandments. I will now pause for a few questions and then we'll talk about some other aspects of the post round process than the literal question and answer process. Yeah.
I guess I'm asking, like, if you have a judge who, as just like a person or an individual, is kind of like, how do you like get yourself out of, or like, how do you make sure that the inverse of power dynamics of us being children and them being adults is like respected? Because like, I don't know, like most judges are great. Some judges get a little aggressive towards students, and it's
for
like,
sure.
How do you answer that as a child?
Right. Yeah, it's a good question. And I think, the unfortunate fact of this is you're probably not going to change the behavior of any individual adults, right? So you're probably not going to get your judge to use different tone of voice or different language with which to impress upon their ideas. That's a very difficult thing to mediate without coach involvement. If it escalates to sort of acute rudeness, right? So you've got a judge who has, they've broken the understand your debaters are a human rule, right? They've sworn, they've levied personal attacks, they've yelled. Get a coach involved. like immediately get a coach involved, get an adult involved in that situation so they can understand, hey, this judge should not be interacting with our students. We should strike them at all tournaments going forward. Because this is another aspect of the like, we're building a sort of information system about our judges and how those judges interact. We're going to identify some judges who are bad judges or bad people, and those are people that we want to make sure that everyone on our team forever going forward is not being judged by that person. I would say that in most situations where, in almost all situations, you want to try to use this as a learning experience where, again, if you feel like there are some situations where this comes up where it's not like the judge is sort of acutely rude, but like they're responding poorly to a particular line of questioning, right? So sometimes it happens where there's a line of questioning where it gets perceived as like, okay, this is going down the argument post-round path. I don't like that. The judge gets a little defensive or they start kind of yelling back or something like that. In those situations, I would say sort of like try to find the lower stakes question, right? So if you're asking a question about the decision, the judge is perceiving that as like an attack on the decision, I'd be like, okay, well, was this the right 2-in-R choice? Like, let's, give you some low-hanging fruit. Let's do something easy now and try to sort of switch the post-rounding tenor to something that's a little bit lower stakes and a little bit easier for the judge to handle. Again, if you're in a situation where you're facing some acute rudeness, the judge has said something that is inappropriate or unacceptable, at that point, leave the post-round, involve a coach. Yeah.
What's like the worst example of post round you've seen? What's the craziest?
I've seen quite a few sort of extended post rounds. I'm not going to call anyone out on this. The worst I saw was a couple years ago. A debater I coached was really, really upset about a debate that they had lost and, had levied some swear words, some personal insults, some stuff in that direction. That I think was the worst example of post-rounding that I had seen. Again, I'm not going to call anyone out. I've seen quite a few post-rounds that I would consider aggressive in nature that didn't escalate to the disrespectful, not seeing the judge as a person level. And I wouldn't label any of those as like the worst post rounds I've ever seen or anything like that. It's like, again, I think by and large, most of my contemporaries were pretty reasonable in terms of how they conducted the post round. But sometimes you hear stories about like other debates or debates beforehand that seem a little bit aggressive, especially like at the NDT when someone's career ends. I think that's when the most aggressive post rounds happen. Yeah.
This might not have like a specific answer or anything, but do you have any tips on like detaching from your emotions when you're like particularly frustrated for a result and that's like inhibiting your ability to ask like questions?
So I think that it's sort of having that just like moment of reflection of like, I am frustrated, I am upset. Like you need to like, in some ways you need to sort of validate those emotions for yourself, right? You don't want to sort of fight that. You want to be like, okay, I understand that I'm having an emotional reaction to losing and an emotional reaction to this decision that I think is unjust. And I'm understanding that, I'm going to validate that. Now, how do I use that productively? How do I channel that productively, right? So I'm having this frustration in the moment, but I know from the long-term project, I need to understand why it was that the judge thought we lost, understand what strategic decisions were made that the judge thought were poor, understand whether there were evidence quality concerns that the judge had, or whether it was a communication question, right? So just be like, yeah, I'm going to reflect, I'm going to have this kind of 30-second moment of reflection. I'm mad. I am upset. It's okay to be mad and upset, but how do I channel this productively? Well, I ask questions to understand why we lost, understand what strategic decisions were made, understand what we need to change for next time. So it's like, you're just going to encounter those decisions that frustrate you. It's gonna happen, right? And frankly, you're going to encounter some bad judges. Like, you're going to encounter decisions that are poorly thought out and poorly reasoned. That's gonna happen, right? But it's a question of how you sort of channel your reaction to that, how you try to use it as a learning process. Other questions? Okay. One other additive part about this is, like, you want to make sure you're understanding whether the judge's qualms with your debating were about the evidence quality that you presented or about the communication standards of the debating. So, you want to, if it's an evidence quality, that's like a fixable thing that can be fixed through research, and you want to fix it through research ASAP, right? So if the judge said, well, I thought the risk of the DA was low because, these link cards, they're from blogs or something like that. You go, okay, well, I need to cut a qualified peer-reviewed article that says the same thing, right? You want to identify those things right off the bat. And you also want to identify if the judge thinks, well, your evidence is fine, but your evidence is fine, but it's just a question of communication. Like, that's useful to know. One aspect of the post round that I'm going to talk about a little bit separately from the commandments, because the commandments are just the question and answer process. But okay, the debate ends. What happens now? There's an old school rule that I always tell my debaters that I think you all should implement, which is that at least one debater should be in the room at all times in the post round process. You should not both, like, be in the bathroom or be in the hallway. You don't want to ditch the debate after the debate is over, right? You want to be at your laptop, at your seat, projecting some power, looking at the judge, right? Showing that you are a confident debater, that you think you've won this debate. This is a very minor thing, but I do think it's perceptually helpful, right? Make sure that you are there in the room with the judge as the judge is deciding the debate. Don't ditch. Now, if the judge ditches the room, don't follow them. But at least one person should stay in the room until the decision is rendered, okay? So stay in the room as the judge is deciding the debate. Don't all go in the hallway and, like, chit-chat with your friends. Stay in the room, look at the judge, make sure you're around there. The other kind of, external complicating factor is, like, well, what happens when my coach wants to post round? It is okay for coaches to post round at times and to ask some clarifying questions, and it doesn't really bother me too much. I do at times get bothered when coaches are like, a coach who has not watched the debate asks a series of, like, how did you possibly decide the debate this way? And you're like, well, because, it technically went down one way and, you didn't see it happen. So I do get frustrated by that. Obviously, from a debater's perspective, you can't really control your coach. But again, you do want to be aware of some of these dynamics of, like, sometimes, coaches, and much more, even more so than debaters, are reflections of their institution and of the other teams at the school, right? So how the coach conducts themselves in the post round is important. And, I always think, like, one or two coach questions, fine. Once you get to, like, 4 or 5, or it gets aggressive, like, not fine at all. Just posturing that doesn't help anybody. But, sometimes coach post rounds happen. And that's, just something to be aware of. Also, another small nuance, when you're on the other side of a post round, meaning you're the team that won, the other team lost, they're post rounding for a long time, what do? How do you conduct yourself? If the post round is extending well into pre-round preparation for the next debate, quietly leave the room, and that's fine. No judge is gonna, no one will take that as rude if you leave the room while the other team is conducting a post round, because you need to prepare for the next debate. Again, rare situations where post rounds extend this long. I have seen this happen, and I have been in this situation. Quietly leave the room if the post round is extending. Particularly true for elimination round debates, right? So, like, You don't need to sit in the room for 30 minutes as the other team is yelling at the judges who voted against them. Leave the room and prepare for your next debate. That's the proper way to conduct yourself in that situation. Any other questions?